like to start our panel. And first of all, salam alaikum and shalom. Greetings, dear friends and guests. Ahlan wa sahlan, bruchim abayim, and welcome to our special panel on Israel, Startup Nation, Challenges and Opportunities in 2020. It's a truly exciting moment for us as human beings, for us as Middle Easterns, and for us as Omanis and Israelis and our guests from other countries. Before we will start and introduce our incredible speakers today, I would like to thank each one of you for your personally participation today. I would like to thank our panelists for sharing their knowledge and insights with us. And I would like to thank our team, Carol and Elad, for putting a lot of efforts and for their hard work to make this happen. Can you all hear me good?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, great. So if you have any technical difficulties or if you have any of the questions, please type in the chat. Both the panelists and the attendees, we're here for you, and we want you to have the best experience. So feel free to ask us everything during the panel. I know that we all want to start, but with your permission, I will say a few another words on behalf of our organization. We are the Israeli Omani Friendship Society. We are non-government, non-political, voluntarily and independent organization, which is promoting human connections and mutual understanding between people of Israel and the people of Sultanate of Oman. Our main goal is to bring our people together in order to work together and make our region and our community better, and to create a better future for all of us. So for today, we will host our three speakers from three different fields. I think those three different fields are very relevant, especially in the times like that, times of pandemic, where we can't really participate in traditional business making or connection making like we used to do before the pandemic. So I think those three fields, they're super critical and super important nowadays. Today we will host Asaf Luxembourg, who will share with us his story and insights regards the innovation and startup in Israel. Merav Harel, she will talk to us about the fintech and all this developing industry, both in Israel and worldwide. And Leah Tzur, she's an expert in the cybersecurity field. We all understand that even right now during our event, may be exposed to some cyber threats, and therefore cybersecurity, I think it's the important fund of every activity online nowadays. So this is three topics, three speakers that will share their experience and knowledge with us. And with your permission, dear guests, I would like to start with Asaf Luxembourg, our first speaker. I will introduce Asaf briefly, and after that, Asaf will take the lead. Asaf Luxembourg is a business expert in business development and marketing professional. He's passionate about promoting Israel through business, innovation, startup, and entrepreneurship. He's passionate about helping international talents in Israel, which is called the Startup Nation. Asaf provides consulting and content services to organizations who bring young professionals to Israel. He also consults and advises startups on storytelling, pitch, marketing, and business development. Asaf's experience varies from the private sector to the public sector and nonprofit and third sector. Asaf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me well? All stations, this is control. Do you read? Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Asaf Luxembourg. What I want to do is just introduce myself. I'm very excited to be here in really 1 minute. I want to tell you what I believe the main message from Israel, in my opinion, is. And then, as we like to say, dugri, what's the bottom line? And lay the foundation for the interesting discussions that we will have. I will not talk about cyber or fintech or any of those fields. I'm going to lay the foundation and let the other experts take it from there. So as Andre said, I'm not going to go long. I do a lot of things, but what matters here, I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't want to start my business. My dream when I was young is to be an ambassador. So I'm passionate about being patriotic for my country, just like in any country. I happened to start a business that did two things for the sake of the audience here. Number one is I promote a lot of what Israel has to offer in terms of high-tech innovation, startups, and entrepreneurship. And I am a marketing and business development advisor and consultant. And I want to connect the two and tell you what I think I could contribute to this discussion. I am not here to tell you about how Israel is successful with high-tech. You don't need me for that. That's well online. I do want to tell you what I believe is the main message from our story with our success in startups that is very relevant for Oman, very relevant for the region, for other countries, and for Israel itself, because we need to learn from our own experience. So I want to talk about branding and marketing for a minute in the context of the new exciting reality, which is really just in the beginning of the making here in our region. Israel kind of caught the wave of Startup Nation mainly in 2008. There was a book called Startup Nation. It was also translated to Arabic, became a huge bestseller. And it really helped nail Israel's identity as a startup nation. But Israel was good with startups beforehand. Now, you may be surprised that the entire startup nation and the high-tech industry in Israel is maybe 10%. 10% of Israel is high-tech. Those 10% are responsible for more than 40% of the exports, but it's still only 10%. Most of Israel is the 90%. Usual commerce, industry, and business sector. So Israel is a country with a mix of things, just like every country. The reason those 10% allowed the entire 100% to create a very accepted brand around the world for business is because of three reasons. And I want to tell you what I think they are, because they're very relevant for Oman, the Gulf region, Israel, the Levant, the Middle East as a region. First of all, those 10% were based on something that is true for all the 100%. It has to do with the culture of our country, not about high-tech and innovation, the culture of how Israelis perceive the world around them. Number two, the brand Startup Nation was available in the market. No other country claimed to be Startup Nation before two people wrote that book about Israel. People in Silicon Valley did not need the book to know that Israel is Startup Nation. They knew it from the 1990s. The magic was getting to the rest of the world. So it was based on a true foundation. Number two, the brand positioning was available in the market. Number three, it was relevant to the world. 2008, Facebook, Twitter, social media, Web 2.0, the internet becoming an essential part of our life. So it was relevant to the world, it was available in the market, and you didn't just want to be Startup Nation, you have to base it on truly who you are. These are three factors that made this brand really work. Take something that was true before and make it known and acceptable by everyone. By the way, this brand is today in a decline, not because Israel is less Startup Nation, because everybody knows that already. No news. So what is the message? I believe that in a, looking 50 years ahead, in a post-oil world, Countries like Israel and Oman, we are small, we're not big empires. We need to tell the world who we are. What is unique about us and how is it relevant to the end consumer? And the answer has to come from the country and the people, not from the market. It's not, oh, it's better to be finance, let's be finance. Oh, it's better to be tourism, let's be tourism. Oh, it's better to go into cyber, let's be cyber nation. No, don't go with the fashion, go with something that is really you. So you have to go to your sources, to your heritage, to your history, your legacy, and dig it from there. This is a healthy branding process, just like companies do. Now, it's not only true for countries, it's true for cities. It's true for peoples. It's true for companies, and it's true for individuals to succeed in their careers. This is the focus of storytelling. Now, the truth is, for Israel, it happened by mistake. Israel did not hire McKinsey in the year 2002 to think of a 20-year process of becoming startup nation. We are not China. It happened by mistake. We were with a certain culture, which we always had, which was very poised and fit when the information revolution came and made entrepreneurship and innovative thinking so admired and accepted. The startup culture. So it happened almost by mistake, but we can't rely on miracles. So we also can't rest on our rules. We need to always remind ourselves, who are we, where we come from, and where are we going? When you combine these three things, you have a great foundation for a story that you can tell the world. And you can find those foundations in Islamic heritage, in Greek philosophy, in Jewish heritage, like the Gemara. This is basic human truths. And that is the opportunity for a country like Oman and others in the region. I don't know Oman inside out, but it appears to me that a country like Oman, since the world didn't decide for you who you are, you have the opportunity to decide who you want to be. So you can decide what do you want to tell the world about you, and the world will listen. If the story is true, the positioning is available in the market, and it's relevant to the end consumer. So what is the degree in what I want to say? And with that, I'll come to an end. I believe that Oman, just like the rest of the region, has a huge growth potential. Because unlike France or the UK, we have a clear horizon to create whatever brand we want. That is the beauty of the desert. It's a land of opportunity. And the first mover advantage is real, especially when it comes to the relationship with countries like Israel. Now, Israelis, as you'll come to learn, we're good in thinking like entrepreneurs with no patterns. Create something out of nothing. We're not too good in planning for 20 years ahead, not as individuals, not as a country. We were never an empire. We were not the Roman Empire. We were not the British Empire. We were not the Ottoman Empire. We're good with small. Israel is small. The Jewish people is small. Startups are small. Entrepreneurship begins small. Wall Street is not small. Silicon Valley is not small. Startup Nation is small. And it's very interesting and important to know that about us. For good or bad, this is what we bring to the table. But this is also what we lack. We lack structure. We lack corporate thinking. We lack it when startups grow bigger, and we need to think like a corporation. We lack it in governmental planning, like utilities, roads, airports, and I see Meirav smiling. So, because we laugh about it, but we need to recognize it upon ourselves. We are good with speedboats. We're not good with aircraft carriers. And that's where countries who have those understandings, especially with industries like oil, they can come and add value. And that's how great connections are made. Another thing is I believe that in the coming years, there will be a competition in becoming the gateway to the East. A lot of people who are used to come and do business with Israel, whether it's Silicon Valley, New York, other places, now there's a new gateway to the East. And there's going to be a competition about that. Now, I'm not sure that a country like Oman can compete with Dubai with finance, but you can absolutely decide which niche corresponds to who you are and go and conquer that niche and become the go-to place for the sectors of X, Y, and Z. That is absolutely an opportunity. And that's where I believe great business opportunities, and not only business, great friendships and good relationships can emerge from. But we both have to remember, the market doesn't care about us. Not about me, not about Israel, not about you, and not about Oman. The market cares about the market. All the good ideas that we'll have to always come back to the basics and think about the end consumer. And in the post-COVID world, which is around the corner, there are new rules for the game, for how business is made, for how cultures interact. It's a new world. The virus will go away, but our culture is changing. And we have to begin not with Israel and not with Oman and not with the Gulf region and not the Middle East. We need to begin with Joe Schmo, who is sitting right now in Ohio. What is his reality? With Michelle, who is sitting in Europe, what is her reality? And how can we both join hands together and bring value to these end consumers? That's where real magic could happen in working together side by side. And that's the real opportunity, in my opinion. So to end in a personal note, I believe that thinking about what is true, the available positioning, and what the market needs, we both have a shared world legacy that has to do with our region and our past together. It has to do with Adam and Eve, who got expelled from the Garden of Eden. It has to do with Abraham, who crossed the Arab Peninsula from your region to this region. It has to do with Moses, who left Egypt. It has to do with crossing the desert on the way to the promised land as a concept. And the desert is the land of endless opportunities. It doesn't come easy. The desert is not merciful, but it brings opportunities, just like the market. So I believe if we go to the past, we can find the core for what could be a great foundation for the future. And I am very excited about this event and the current times. And I want to thank you all for having me. And I would be happy to answer any question about any matter. And I hope that from here we'll get drilled down to the more business side of cyber and fintech. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Asaf. It was incredible, truly interesting, and we will have a special time to ask our speakers questions. But again, I encourage you to ask some questions and just to type here in the chat. Asaf, I have one question for you. Just very shortly, if you can address that. You said that we need to use our heritage in order to create something new. Can you give us, please, one example how we are in Israel or how any other culture, country, society used something to recreate or to make something new, innovational?
Yeah, so I don't want to go too deep into it. And for those who are interested, there's some material of me online going more deep into that. But generally speaking, I believe that if you're attending this conference right now and you're focused on business, probably you heard the name Simon Sinek in terms of marketing. and strategy. And if you know Simon Sinek, and he spoke about start with why. So that has to do with innovation in my mind. And I'll tell you what I mean. If you have why, what, and how, just like any business owner explains, why I do what I do, and how I do it. It's marketing. Most companies, as Simon Sinek taught us, they explain what they do and how. The great companies explain what they do and why. So they start with why. If you tell the world what you do and how, it will be hard for you to change it. You will have to come up with different reasons for why you do it. If you tell the world who you are and why you do what you do, you will allow for what you do and how you do it to change according to market needs. It will not change who you are. And that's where the answer comes from. We need to dig down to the past and understand that, our past, if you go back, was we have a joint past and we have a shared future. Now, will it be around fintech or cyber, or tomorrow it's going to be around virtual reality, or Oman will come the gateway to the East for countries like Israel in terms of other sectors? I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe Oman will reinvent itself as the cultural center for everything that has to do with, I don't know what. That's for the Omanis to tell me who they are and what their place in the market is. I don't know. But going back will bring joint foundations that the market will accept. Consumers like Joe Schmo and Michelle, they know to smell things that are not genuine, just like we do. So that's my answer. The reason we have to go there, it's not because just it's the right thing to do, it's the thing that works the most.
Okay, thank you very much, Asaf. Before we continue, any other references? Anybody else want to raise a hand or type something quickly? All right, fine. So thank you, Asaf. We will continue with our next guest speaker. Let me introduce you to Merav Harel. She's very experienced. She actually have 20 plus years of experience in fintech technology. She known as she works in the fields of fintech, blockchain, and digital disruption, investment, and trading interfaces. Merav will tell about herself a little bit more about her background and about the fintech as an industry in the whole. Merav, the floor is yours. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you, Asaf, for inviting me here. I'm very honored to be speaking. It's interesting how the world has become smaller, and we can sit in different places in the world and share ideas and think how we can create a better future for all of us. I'm going to start. I have a little presentation that I created, and I'm going to be speaking a little bit about, I'd say, the forces that are shaping the financial ecosystem and what it means to, to deal with fintech, and I think how, noticing how the world is going to be looking up in a few years can help a lot of entrepreneurs and companies and regulators move ahead and I'd say adapt. So I'm going to be sharing the screen. Just a second, please. Can you guys see it? Can you see my screen? All right. Okay, so a little bit background about myself. I'm a veteran of, it's embarrassing, almost 20 years in the fields of finance and technology. I actually started out separately with them. I was a programmer in the dot-com era. And then after the dot-com bubble burst, I became an investment consultant by the Israel Security Authority. I combined the two 10 years ago before the name Fintech was, given to this field. I was the business development manager and product manager of LumiTrade, one of the biggest security trading websites in Israel that was awarded as one of the 3 best trading websites in Europe, not only in Israel. I left that position in the bank after 7 years of being in this position about almost 4 years ago. And since then, I've been working with international regulators, enterprises, financial institutions, banks, companies, stock exchanges, with everything that has to do with moving ahead with the next step in what I call the evolution of finance. I'm a COO of Iconic, which is a company based in Monaco. Not long ago, I was awarded as one of the 100 most inspirational women in blockchain in the world, and twice I was awarded in London as one of the leading women in fintech in the world. Enough about myself. Let's talk a little bit about the various forces that are shaping the financial sector. It's very interesting because all of us know the financial sector as banks and stock exchanges and loans and all the rest of it. And if we're looking and seeing in the last, I'd say 10, 15 years, I think since 2008, 2009, we've been seeing, I'd say, a change in the dynamics of what's happening and various forces that are coming in different directions, which I'm going to be touching upon and then emphasizing a few of them. And I'm just going to ask you a question. Can you guys see like my screen, the presentation, or can you also see the screen of, like, am I blocking some of this with this area here, or can you just see the screen?
We see the screen. We see your presentation.
You see the
Just
presentation. You don't see the pop-up that I have of watching you guys. Oh, all right, okay. So if I'm looking at what these forces are, they start with the systematic entrance of the tech giants, and I'm talking about not only Google and Facebook, which we're going to be speaking a little bit about, but also WeChat from the Far East. We're going to be talking about new business models that are based on data. If we're looking at the services that these tech giants provide, they're not taking commissions like traditional banks are. They're using data in order to create revenue for themselves, and that's something that is kind of a shift in the paradigm that people in finance and workers in this field need to understand, that the business model has changed. We're talking about accelerated technological developments that actually enable advanced interfaces and inventions and tools. And I think Asaf mentioned this. We're all holding a phone in our hands, and our phones are actually stronger than the first IBM that sent a spaceship to the space. And that enables a lot of things to happen. And some of these innovations are, I'd say, changing the world. Let's look at digital currencies and blockchain and AI. And the next step is 5G, and we're going to see how that goes. And with regards to these technological developments, we're seeing new things happening, not only on, I'd say, company levels, but also on a regulatory level around the world, including creating digital currencies by governments. Central-based digital currencies, they're called, central banks digital currencies, and we're seeing a change in I'd say in the way of looking at money these days. And the banks, they need to adapt to all of this, and they need to change by cooperating and opening their APIs in order to allow startups to work with them. They have a whole new field of competitors. These startups have already grown and matured into big companies. We're talking about companies that have become banks in themselves. We're talking about N26 or PayPal, which has become a force of its own. And the shape of their competitors, they're not competing against each other anymore. They're competing against many, many startups and systematic entrance of the tech giants that we just spoke about. And of course, on all of this, there's the regulatory environment that needs to kind of adapt to these changes, because if we're looking right now from the regulatory perspective, what we're seeing is that there are two sets of rules for playing in this field. One set of rules is for the banks and the financial institutions that are very highly regulated. But on the other hand, these new entrants into the field, even let's look at the tech giants, they don't have these same rules. They can do different things, they can play differently, which gives them an advantage in taking over the dominance in the financial sector. Now, it's very important to be aware of all of these dynamics and where things are going, because as Asaf said, there are a lot of opportunities here, and of course a lot of risks on the other hand, for all of the sides involved. And I'm going to start with talking a little bit about digital currencies, because if I'm looking at this area here of the accelerated technological developments, I think that one of the biggest changes that we're seeing right now taking place in the world are involved in anything that has to do with the new, I'd say, digital assets, and how the world is accepting them. And I think that the starting point is with Bitcoin, that came out in 2009, which actually, when it came out as two separate, I'd say, inventions. One of them is a digital, token that doesn't have to do with governments, which is something new for all of us. We've all been, born and raised in a world where money is created by governments, right, by countries. And this is something that Bitcoin kind of like made in a social experiment about and said, let's check this is a paradigm that we can change. Do countries need to be the ones that are creating money? And the underlying technology, which is blockchain, which enables tokens to be created without having a central bank in the background taking, and banks looking over what's happening. And it kind of like shifts the power dynamics again from the traditional financial structures to something new. And kind of like opens, the long tail of I'd say, there's an economical concept that's called the long tail. Okay. And what happened was that with the invention of Bitcoin and the technology of blockchain, the long tail of creating money has actually opened. That means that today, all of us sitting in this conference, or anybody at home listening to this lecture, can actually create a token right now, can create their own money. Okay, it's not something that only governments can do. Technologically, any one of us can create money. And the question is, what do you do with this money, and for what, the why of why would I create a token? Now, the thing is that for now, it doesn't make sense. So we haven't found the reason of why to create money for, personal people. But there is a very, very big use case for companies to come and create tokens. And I think that one of the shifts that happened was about a year ago when Facebook came out and said, we want to issue a token. And I think this is the point where there were a lot of ICOs and a lot of tokens and a lot of, I'd say, digital assets and currencies created during 2017 and 2018. But they were kind of under the radar, and the regulator was kind of like sitting behind and looking at this thing that is happening. But I think that the moment that one of the big companies, and this was Facebook that actually came out with this, said, you know what, we want to create a token ourselves. I think that's when the regulators and everybody understood the potential, or I'd say the impact that creating a token that is not government created could have on an economy. And, the reasons of why to create a token for a company, or, why would Facebook want to do this? There's a lot of reasons, reaching larger customers and, that are unbanked, and the power that it gives you, and mostly because of the data, because the change that we're seeing now is that the data is very, very valuable. And the problem with this is that we're looking at Libra itself and what they wanted to do, having a company create money and in the background hold a basket of other tokens. It's a problem, okay? Especially if it's a company that has 2.7 billion users, because the moment that who's a company, or who's a body that creates money and holds a basket of money in the background? Central banks do this, and if Facebook decides to do something like this, it becomes the biggest central bank in the world. Okay, so and then the regulators' response came really, really fast, and Mark Zuckerberg was called up to talk about this, and countries around the world were saying, no way, we're going to let Libra enter our country. At the same time, something very, very interesting happened, and that was the governments around the world started understanding that this new technology has potential, and China was the first entrant into this, and decided to create a digital currency of itself, which is now being distributed already. And it's very interesting because, again, data is what you can have the moment that your money is digital. Okay. Other countries started joining in. There's now like a global arms race of creating a digital currency. There are countries in also around the UAE that are thinking about creating these kind of digital currencies, and the data behind it is very, very important, and what you're going to be doing with it. So I think that this is one of the major points that are now affecting the world. And I think that the last step that we see, that now PayPal has decided to allow Bitcoin to be traded, and then transferred through it, is kind of like a step that kind of like gives an official stamp that, digital currencies are here to stay, and that's something that all of us need to take into account. And another point that we realize now is that the tech giants are also here to stay, and they have a claim. And we need to see as regulators how we're dealing with this, and as companies how we want to deal with this. And I think that one of the major steps that we've also seen in the last couple of weeks is Google's step that came and said we're making a Google bank, or if we need to make it more accurate, is creating a Google interface that Google has done agreements with, I think, 6 or 8 major banks, and it's going to be giving the services, as a platform to these banks. And that kind of changes also the paradigms of who is the one that's giving service to people. Is it Google now? Are the banks only in the background? How are banks going to be dealing with this? Now, as Asaf said, I'm going to kind of roll back and, kind of back, because we can talk about these different forces on different levels, and delve in deeper into them and understand the consequences and where there are opportunities and where are the risks for each of the players in this field. We can talk about this for hours, and I'm invited to talk about these things by many governments around the world. But I'm going to kind of like close what I'm saying, and say and kind of like put the emphasis on the need for change, because what we're seeing right now is that every paradigm of in the financial world, starting with who is giving the service, what kind of service they're giving, is digital currencies, is something else, why they're doing this, data right now, okay, not just keeping the value of money and enjoying the revenues of interest rates and stuff like that. Everything, how you're going to be doing it, all of the paradigms that have to do with finance are now changing. And I think that each entity, starting from governments and countries and companies and banks and small companies and people, have the ability right now to adapt to these changes and take advantage of the opportunities and create a better place for them to kind of, like I'd say, make the risk smaller, or they can just stand and not do much and let the change happen, and then they're going to find themselves in a different place. And Asaf said something about the why. From my point of view, why I do what I do is, first of all, because I think this field is very, very exciting. And second of all, I like seeing things moving forward because, along with these risks, there are opportunities for making, a better financial world, and making, I'd say a change in what we're, in the power structures that we're seeing in the world, and it's going to happen anyway. And I think that each one of us has an opportunity here to create, a better future. So I hope this kind of gives you an overview of what's happening in the sector. Of course, we didn't touch upon COVID, but it has also been one of the forces that is changing what's happening, and kind of, I'd say, moving things ahead, speeding them up. And if you guys have any questions, I'm very happy to answer and to delve into any of these aspects that you'd like me to speak a little bit more about. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Merav. Would you like just to, just to end the sharing of your screen, just to end it?
Yeah, Did it go out?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Okay, just a minute. Just a minute. It is happening.
Take your time. Take your time. It's all good.
No, I'm not taking my time here. But
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Merav. Wait a minute. We have a someone raised their hand. Aisha raised the hand. Would you like to speak, Aisha? Aisha?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Asaf, thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting. And Megab, your presentation was very interesting. And I'm not pretty much related to finance or technology, but I'm more into law. I'm a lecturer and I'm teaching cyber law currently, and I plan to do my PhD also in cyber laws. What you told, just like, where the world is changing, it's rapidly changing and nobody can stop it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the things that you just said, that, okay, we're going to be having a lot of things entering the market and we have to accept them. My question is, and you talked about the regulations, that there have to be regulations. How much regulations do we currently have? And are laws strong enough to kind of curtail any abuse? Because I mean, as a person who doesn't know anything about technology and finance, I am always going to be skeptical, as in, should I be investing? Should I be going ahead with it? So what kind of jurisdictions are applying on these? And what basically should be the security? Are the governments taking part in it? And stuff like it. My question, I don't know, I can't pretty much wrap it, but I hope you kind of understand what I mean.
I think so. I think you're kind of like asking about the risk and who's kind of like looking, who's the I'd say who's overlooking to see that the risks are not too crazy, and kind of like stopping the players from pulling in directions that could create problematic situations.
Yes.
I think that's a very good question, because I'm kind of like thinking about which direction I should answer this question from. Well, first of all, regulators around the world are becoming more and more aware of the risks of what's happening. I think that the question is are they fast enough? And do they understand enough in order to block these new kinds of innovations that could create risk? And do they want to? Okay, because one of the things that we're seeing is that the financial sector is highly regulated, not because anybody thought of this ahead of time, but because every time that there was a financial crisis, came the regulators and said, wait, this happened because ABC, let's make a law against ABC. Okay, and for the last, I'd say, I think it's 100 or 150 years, these laws have been kind of like building one upon the other, and it's not like anybody came ahead of time and said, oh, the risk in 200 years from now is we're gonna have a financial crisis because somebody did the subprime crazy thing, right? The laws were always created after the bad things happened. So I'd say that putting our trust in having the law being created ahead of time to stop the next devastating outcome of these new technologies, if they happen, is kind of like asking for too much. We can talk about it, we can teach the regulators, we can explain it, but the advancements are happening so fast and in so many different fields that it's very, very hard to keep track of everything that's happening and think ahead of time of what kind of scenarios could happen, because there's also a risk in stopping innovation, and trying to say, no, what, everybody freeze, let's not do anything. You can't do that as a regulator, because I think that innovation is kind of like part of human evolution. And imagine yourself, once upon a time, people, traded with seashells, and then came governments and created money, right? And then imagine yourself that somebody came and said, wait, stop, let's not create money because we don't know what the repercussions of that are going to be. You can't stop innovation, and it's wrong, because it's like I'd say it's like steps that humans are creating in their evolution to create a better. Just a second, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Is the Wi-Fi gone a little bit? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm using a Wi-Fi, and every time that somebody calls, it kind of like freezes. So, okay. So what I'm saying is that I think that the regulators have a real dilemma here. And I lecture and I advise them, so I know the dilemma, because on the one hand, nobody wants to stop human evolution, nobody wants to stop innovation, and on the other hand, things are changing so rapidly that I give lectures, I think, every couple of days, and every lecture that I give has to be different because the pace of change is so big. I spoke in Poland, it was last week. The day after that came PayPal and said, we're allowing Bitcoin to be traded, and that's like such a big step, because everybody was saying Bitcoin is not going to catch up, it's not going to happen, and suddenly people are going to be paying with it. And a few weeks before that, Google came out and said, we're creating a bank, and it's something that we've been speaking about in theory as one of the scenarios that could happen. So I'd say that we don't have, I would trust your own opinion and your own kind of like set of logic, and looking at the world and saying, okay, this is happening, and understanding what's happening and keeping track of what's happening, and kind of like saying, okay, the risks, this and this and this, let's see how we move ahead. But remember that every risk has an opportunity. So if we're talking here about innovators and entrepreneurs, then any one of these forces that are changing the financial sector have an opportunity embedded in them, and not only one, like hundreds of opportunities of how to make things more efficient and better. And you know what, even I'd say more humane, and with the values that all of us want to see happening in the world around us. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Aisha, for your question. Thank you, Mirav. We will still have enough time to ask our panelists a lot of questions. Don't worry. We are here to talk. We're here to discuss, to have a conversation. No worries. But point, Aisha, thank you for that. Thank you, Mirav, for a clear answer.
My pleasure.
And now, I think it's very connected to what you've been talking about. I would like to introduce to you our third speaker, Leah Tzur. Leah is basically, she's an expert in risk management, fraud prevention, cybersecurity, and she's been working over 16 years with the leading banks and other financial companies here in Israel. I believe Leah would like to introduce herself, and she will do that better than I. So thank you, Leah, for participating in our panel. Really appreciate that. The floor is yours.
Thank you. You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Okay, so I want to start with السلام عليكم وألف مرحبا. أنا كثير مبسوطة وسعيدة على هذا التعاون المفيد، وكمان بدي أعزمكم في المستقبل إن شاء الله التعاون معنا في دولة إسرائيل. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy and excited to be here with you. This kind of conference reminds us to be optimistic towards life and never lose hope. Shalom from Israel to all our audience. I want to start by sharing my career path and the evolution I have experienced from being a risk manager to being a cyber risk manager in the banking industry. I began my career in the capital market about 18 years ago while establishing a risk management and control unit in 2 banks in Israel. I've done it for 10 years, all of which I manage internal and external fraud prevention, operational risk, compliance, business continuity plans, and financial risk. Somewhere in 2005, more or less, organizations and especially financial institutions started using the term information security. When I was promoted to manage the fraud and embezzlement risk management unit at one of the biggest Israeli banking group, everybody started using the word cyber. Something interesting has happened regarding cybersecurity in the financial institution, and more precisely in the banking industry. Historically, there were a number of units which operated separately. On the one hand, there was the information security unit, and on the other hand, there were the internal fraud, the risk management, the internal monitoring and investigation unit, and so on. The kind of risk management was enough or sufficient for those days. The hackers hadn't been so sophisticated and advanced as they are today. The more advanced technological and managerial abilities the hackers and the criminal organization get, in parallel, the same we need to implement in the organization gatekeepers units. It's like a game of cat and dogs, right? The most important thing is collaborating, joining forces to block hackers and building an effective wall shield. We realized that in the most sophisticated attacks, there were collaboration with external entities. And over time, we realized that most attacks involved an insider, either by social engineering, threat, or bribes. Eventually, organizations have become so secured, which made it impossible for hackers inside threat. On top of all that, there is the digitalization of the bank's activities and procedures, whether they are in the bank application, website, or through a third party via API. So what do we get? A pretty large exposure towards cyber attacks. The days where clerks identified and personally knew their clients, verified each and every transaction, are already gone. Today, most transactions are operated end-to-end automatically, including the controls. This business model has obviously brought a lot of advantages and benefits, such as advancement, modernization, globality, cost reduction, efficiency, and a lot more. However, it has also brought a new risk. If a hacker gets into our network and we have end-to-end automated procedures, then they can shut down the controls, delete all the logs to their actions, and just get the money or the data and go rest in Hawaii with the flowers. We want and need to monitor business process along with the technological process and procedures. In order to effectively detect the transaction, we need to determine what a anomaly transaction is and to remember that there must be contact expert, one who knows the business. This evolution I've just described is the new next generation, if you will, method that the cybersecurity is aiming towards. This is the future, the cyber risk management. Look at this as building a building. The foundation of the building was basic security system, such as antivirus and encrypted communication. Then we continue building the lobby and the first floor with cyber awareness, security operations center analysts, and lastly, we get to the penthouse. Where there is the money, there is a will. And where there is a will, there is a way. There are criminals and thieves that will be in the business. The ROI of the hackers are very high. Therefore, we can see those methods, especially in the financial institutions, that are bound to be attacked compared to other sectors. And of course, they have more strict cybersecurity regulations. Regarding the technological aspects, there are many software companies which sell different solutions of anomaly detection. They will assure you artificial intelligence and machine learning abilities and technology, but let me tell you a secret, it doesn't work. There is currently no replacement to the human brain. Those software are mostly rule-based. The best practice methods are managing all the monitoring and detection in one-stop shop, one big security operations center. When we check an embezzlement alert, we don't know whether it was done by an internal employee or a hacker who managed and break into the organization system. And now they are inside the network. The way we will operate and react to every scenario is completely different. On top of all this, every piece of information is like a piece in a big puzzle. The more pieces we get, the higher chance that we see the whole picture. Unfortunately, due to organizational politics and a lot of ego, data doesn't flow smoothly between the units and the interface are not always the best ones. So, bottom line, here is my recommendation. A, you want to have one professional security operations center which monitors the technological and business transaction activities annually. B, when doing the cyber survey, we want to involve a business professional along with a technological professional in order to have one holistic picture. And C, remember, all we need is one strong leadership to reduce the ego. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Leah. And now this is, we're about to be here for 1 hour, and I believe that is the best time right now to take a deep breath and just to ask any question our speakers, everything that you want to know, anything that you want to consult with them. This is the time. Feel free to raise your hand or to write here on chat. And if any of the speakers would like to add some point to something that's been said here, we would also like to hear that from you guys. So the floor is open for questions and answers from our attendees and speakers. Don't be shy.
You know, Leah and I can actually start asking each other questions about, you know, each one's field and give ideas to people if that'll help, you know, people open up and then feel comfortable to ask questions.
And I would also love to add something that has to do with what Aisha asked before. So Andre, you have some tough choices to make.
Ladies first, I guess. Let's be a gentleman.
Okay. Leah, do you want to ask anything, or do you want me to ask? What do you want?
You can ask.
Okay, I'm going to ask something. Okay. Mm-hmm. You know, earlier today we spoke about the dilemma that banks have and their need to move ahead faster with technology in order to keep up with the changes that are happening. And we spoke about one of the solutions that banks have found is opening their API and creating cooperations with startups, because, you know, startups move fast, banks move slow, and, you know, if a bank wanted to create something innovative, it'll take them much more time than just you know, do a cooperation with an existing startup and add that, white label it or whatever that is. What are your thoughts about this?
I think it's the new risk because when connecting to startup, to fintech, you don't know how we manage their risk, and in most cases there are a huge gap between the standards of banking risk management and startup risk management. Obviously, they have a different resource and money. I think the bank will set certain standards to the fintech, to the startups, in order to approve the connection. This must be the solution, because you cannot, you don't do nothing if you have such a good platform and framework of cybersecurity, and then you open the door to a company that doesn't have nothing. So I think this would be a result.
Thank you.
Okay, Asaf, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, a few points. Aisha, I think you asked a very good question. Aisha is still with us, I hope. If you are, thank you. I think you asked a very good question. I'm not an expert on legal stuff, nor I'm expert on cyber stuff, but I will say the following thing when it has to do with innovation and opportunities ahead for both our countries. Technology advances fast. Human beings, a little slower. So if you go 100 years into the past and you go to Europe, and they invented, even more than 100 years, what am I talking about? They invented the internal combustion engine, which meant that people started moving from carriages to cars. You know, there's a new technological need, there's a new technology out there. It changes how we commute. It changes how the city is built. It changes, no need for hay and horses. It has huge changes, but no regulator, as Leah and Merav said, no regulator comes and says, stop everything until we invent traffic laws. And that's what I want to talk about here. We all think this is technology and this is very fast innovation, but in reality, I agree with bigger thought leaders than all of us who claim that we are only in the beginning of the internet. And that's how we need to look at it. And this is where the opportunity is. We haven't invented the social norms and the cultural rules to how to behave with this, and with what's making these things work. And cybersecurity and privacy, GDPR, all of those issues, they start to rise, but they're not really from a legal perspective. They come to compensate a cultural perspective. So the reason we have traffic laws is to make sure people obey to the cultural understanding of how to drive. And that's where the opportunity is. Don't wait for traffic laws to be invented and for the traffic light to be innovative. Think about what is this new thing called cars, new technologies we have today, the internet. What does it mean to the end consumer? What will likely be needed for human beings ahead, and how can we compensate those needs, those pains? So that's for innovation. Usually regulation comes after someone makes a mess. And the idea is to make a mess and then be regulated. It's a good thing. The second point is, we're talking about high tech and innovation and startups. I do not believe that conceptually there's such a thing as the high tech industry, the startup industry. When I work with a fintech startup, I tell them usually, you're not a fintech startup in the startup industry. You are an innovative company in the financial industry. Your world is banks, insurance, hedge funds, financial markets, not venture capital, angels, conferences, and accelerators. So whoever you are over there, whatever you are in with your business, and you're looking at Israel, and you're interested maybe in innovation and startups and technology, try to think not in terms of technology, innovation, and startups. Try to think of your industry. If you're in agriculture or in finance or in industry, who is doing agriculture and finance and industry in Israel, and look for the startups over there. Not go to startup land and start talking to startups. That it would be a much more effective strategy for how to get the most out of us. Andre, you sent something to me in the chat, or someone asked me something, so let me take a look while you guys are moving to the next thing.
First of all, Aisha raised the hand, so Aisha, the floor is yours. Please jump in. Well ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the input, Asaf. And Megav, I actually loved your answer. Like what you, I don't really have a question. It's just a comment that I kind of am going to be making. So what you're saying is that we have to be proactive rather than reactive when it comes to regulations, right? And this is basically, you know, what I kind of have a comment, and pretty much was part of my question, that we have to be proactive, and we can't just rely on any legal bodies to, you know, see something happening and then go ahead and make a regulation or law. So the professionals who basically are experts of the fields, do we see any collaboration between them? Or it's more of my recommendation that there should be more collaboration between the legal bodies and you guys, like fintech and then cybersecurity and everyone, because you have more knowledge, you have more insight, and you have more foresight of what could happen rather than anyone else who's not in the field. So I love this forum because this is where, you know, people are talking. And by the way, I'm based in Dubai. I'm not in Israel or Oman anywhere, and I am a Pakistani, so I have nothing to do with any of the nationalities here. But I'm an educationist, I'm an academic, and I love teaching. So when I go into a class, what I basically see and I want to see is my students, when they would graduate, I want them to do something bigger than, you know, we have done. And for that purpose also, you know, if, when I'm going to go ahead with my PhD, what I want to focus more on is suggesting regulations of what could be done. Again, I want to have a foresight, and I want to give suggestions so that legal bodies and the other bodies, you know, they can basically sit down together and brainstorm and come up with something so that we can avoid another catastrophe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want me to ask, like, you
Oh,
asked
no,
a question?
please go ahead. No, it wasn't a question. It was just a comment. But if you want to comment on it, I'd be more than happy.
Okay, so if it's okay, I'm going to comment about the cooperation between the different bodies, and what I'm seeing now is that we're actually living in a very interesting time, because what we're doing right now and talking around the world, it has kind of like become the norm, and it's very nice, because I think that the differences between countries and people have kind of like become very small, and that also includes regulators talking to startups, talking to corporates, talking to tech giants, talking to banks, and you do see a lot of cooperation between all of these bodies. And I'd say the understanding that they need to kind of like work together and see how to make things better. And you can see cooperations between all of these, like, I'd say, relationships between all of these different forces, because and the regulators themselves. Let's say I know that the Israeli regulators are working very closely with the European ones, and the European ones are working very closely with the American ones. And also, in, you know, and spreading, and in terms of what you're saying, that you like to spread the knowledge, it's something that I also like to do, and that's one of the reasons that I get invited to speak in front of the regulators, in order to show them what the different, I'd say, scenarios could be of, or you know, what each of these forces could lead to where, and what needs to be done. And this ability to, you know, to speak internationally, because everything that happens right now is international. If Facebook takes out a token, it's international. If China creates a digital currency, and therefore it becomes, you know, the governor of the Central Bank of London last year said something, Mike Carney said something very interesting. He said, you know, why do we need to have dollars as the reserve in banks and in the world? Why don't we have some sort of digital currency that is international and is not related to any country? that would be the reserve instead of the dollar. Now, there's something very interesting because when he said it, everybody was looking at him like, what? Why? Why would he say that? But in Davos, in the Economic Forum, the economists around the world were talking about this and saying, why do we actually need the dollar as the money in the background? And now, and then out comes China with their digital currency, and then, what does that mean? Could the dollar be changed with the digital currency of China, or could it be changed with something that's like Libra that all the countries create? And who gets the power? Because the moment that you control the digital assets, you know what everybody is doing. That's a lot of power in one hand. Okay, and that's like one of the risks and things that a lot of people in this sphere need to think about. So I hope that kind of like also sheds more light on this issue.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions?
People, don't be shy. You're sitting here in front of, ask away. Whatever worries you. Do you want to understand what blockchain is? Do you want to understand what cryptocurrencies are? Do you want to know what the tech giants are doing? We can go into any of them. I have the slides ready. Just ask away.
You want to understand where is the best restaurants in Tel Aviv and Haifa? Also ask us.
All of them are closed right now, so I don't know. There are no good restaurants anymore.
Okay.
On that note, maybe just add, and I'm sure, Andre, you're going to mention it as well. If you want to ask them questions, but you don't find this to be the convenient and the right forum, and you want to do it privately, free to address Andre and the team, but also us, the speakers. I think I speak on behalf of Meiral and Leah. You want to look for specific Israeli companies. You're thinking, what is the right way to approach decision makers in Israel, or anything that has to do with being the bridge between both sides, wherever you are and here. So feel free to reach out to us. I would be happy to help, especially when it comes to marketing, marketed strategy, storytelling, and business development.
Thank you, Asaf. So I will, before we will wrap up this session, first of all, I would like to thank you again personally, Leah, Merav, Asaf, Carol. Thank you, Aisha, for your incredible remarks and questions, and thank you for every one of you guys who participated in such a panel. It was a true pleasure to host all of you. Before we will finish, I would like to say that, again, mention that Israeli-Omani Friendship Society, it's a non-political, non-government, voluntarily independent organization, and our goal is exactly to bring not between the governments, but between the people who sit in the other side of the screen, in Oman or Israel, and just to find a mutual and common interests and establish a human connections and mutual understanding. So if you want to know anything about Israel, or if you're an Israelis who are attending to our panel, want to know about Oman, please write us. We will help you with everything. We are working on our cultural aspects between Oman and Israel. We're showing to Israel is the Omani culture. We're showing to Oman is the Israeli culture. We are bringing together between companies from private sector, and this is exactly what we're doing. So in such a panel, if you're looking for a connection for Israeli companies, or if you are Israeli and looking for Omani companies, please let us know, write us. We have our details. We have a website. I think all of you know that. So I will post right now the emails of our speakers right here in the chat. And also, Merav, your WhatsApp over here. So we are Israelis, and I think it's like worldwide. We like to use WhatsApp everywhere. It's very...
We're helping the spread of WhatsApp around the world. Oh no, it's Facebook. More power to Facebook.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to see if everyone got the contacts of our speakers. Great. So on that note, I want to wish to all of you صحة جيدة, صحة جيدة, good health, بריאות טובה in Hebrew. Please stay safe during those times. And I encourage you to step out, as I think the main conclusion of every of this panel from each one of speaker. Yes, I know you guys talked about fintech, about innovation, about cybersecurity, but I think it's all starts journey between human relations and innovation, and everywhere it starts when we are going from the outside of our comfort zone, when we are daring to do something, and as perfectly as Asaf said, when we are going through the desert. Yes, it's a tough place, it's not our comfort zone, but we're navigating and we're finding another people, and we're finding another storytellers and another ideas. So I truly encourage you to go out and be out there, outside of your comfort zone, no matter if it's in Israel or Oman or Britain or France. So once again, thank you very much. If any one of you want to ask last questions for you, dear guests, or for you, dear panelists, this is the time.
Andre, on behalf of all of us, I should maybe say also thank you and the team for putting the effort in organizing this.
I do see 2 questions though, you know.
Sorry?
There are 2 questions I see that right now in the chat room. One of them is about the link. So the somebody came in, Abdallah, I think, he wrote down, and somebody asked about Africa. Do you want to raise the, like, do we have time for the question, or should they ask privately?
Again, first of all, let's say that to our attendees, if you gotta go, because I understand right now this is the prayer time in the Gulf. So if any one of you, like, we don't want to hold you here hostages, God forbid. If you need to go somewhere, you can contact after that to our speakers. But Mirav, if it's okay with you, and if it's okay with other speakers, you can address any questions on the chat. Yeah, go ahead.
Somebody asked about Africa. Does anybody want to speak up?
What was the question?
You know, this is very, I'm going to say something, you know, I usually say at the beginning of my lectures that, you know, this is kind of weird for all of us to be talking over, here, very simple, just give the link. They just want the link, I guess, for this.
I guess they want the link to the recording.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Will do.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Okay, so thank you, Aisha. And on that note, we will finish our meeting. Thank you, everyone who participated, and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.